Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast, brought to you by the Wealthy Speaker School. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business. Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. Jane Atkinson here, and today we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, how to close more business. Yay! Our special guest is Ron Karr. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here. Talk a little bit about how you first got into the speaking business. How many years have you been around?
30.
30 years, yeah?
And I kind of stumbled into it. I had a family tragedy while I was employed as an executive in the computer industry. And basically I had a father near death with a terminal illness, my mother in a significant accident. And after doing what I had to do to keep both of them alive, I realized that, life's too short. And if things are not working out in your life, then do it the way you want to do it. So the job I was in was not making sense. And I went to my EVP and, I said, this is not making sense. What can we do? And we talked it out. He goes, well, he has no other opportunities for me, although he loves me. So we agreed, do you have anything in mind? I said, yeah, maybe I'll just start a sales training business. So he basically funded me for 6 months, covered my expenses and so forth. Got my first client in 2 weeks. And then over the years, my business evolved from sales training to keynote speaking to advisory, a board of directors and companies. And basically what I'm known for is how to build high-performing sales cultures and help companies grow.
Very good. And part of what you've done and part of your journey, you've actually taken all of that good, juicy experience and helped in leadership positions at the National Speakers Associations, which I'm sure has been quite beneficial for them to have that kind of corporate experience come over.
Yes. I mean, I did it as a chapter president of the New York chapter in the early 90s. And then when I was president of NSA 2013-14. So, people always ask me about getting involved in NSA, what's the benefit? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what do you want to get out of it? We don't do anything. We don't do this to get paid. But if you wanted something out of the experience, what would it be? And for me, since I deal with a lot of CEOs and executives, and part of what I do is helping them in their leadership roles, I need to hone my chops in that, because becoming president of NSA put me on a level with them that they understand that I get it and that I have a base from which to speak from.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's a great reason to serve, and I'm sure that they benefited greatly and continue to do so because you're still a part of the board, are you not?
No.
Okay.
I'm not officially on the board. I'm ex officio. I guess what that means is we can get to attend the board meetings, but no, I'm not a voting member of the board.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's talk about your current brand. You started as a sales trainer, but you've evolved into keynotes, sales training as well, I'm sure is still a part of it. The velocity mindset. Let's talk about that a little bit. How did you come there, and what does the velocity mindset mean?
Well, I guess there's a few factors that led to that. Number one is right after I was done with my presidency, as you probably know, Jane, in life, we're going to have the best plans, but life sometimes tells us there's a different route we have to take.
Yes.
And I had some significant back issues after the presidency, so I had 9 surgeries in 2.5 years.
Ooh.
So that basically curtailed my speaking. I still had some consulting projects going on that I was able to do virtually. But when you're going through that really tough time where you're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, wanting to be healthy enough to get back out there and all that, you start questioning what your value is in the world, and as I was approaching 60 years old, what's my legacy about? And so I realized one thing is I wasn't really juiced by how I was known at that time. I was beyond that, I knew there was a greater calling for me. So we went through a rebranding process. And what we found out in the rebranding process, because we contacted all the CEOs that were part of my Chief Revenue Officer Mastermind Group, past clients, and we asked them, what did you get out of working with me and from what we gave you? And to a person, they said that you helped us move the needle significantly, both in our businesses, in our professional lives, and in our personal lives. And so And then I go back to the case studies, because a lot of my speaking, I talk about my case studies that I was involved in helping companies achieve some great results. They actually did the hard work. I was just a messenger. But, we helped one company change the way that change the way the industry buys. Instead of going to a bid every 3 years, we got them to change the industry and go to a 10-year negotiated agreement, a $200 million contract. We talked about having a $98 million cap company with a new product that they couldn't sell coming in and showing them how to change the conversation that allowed the sales to skyrocket and allow them to be sold for $1 billion. So what we got out of this, and I actually had someone who was filming me, to get some new video. He actually came up with it because he saw it. He goes, "Do you know what you always talk about?" I said, "What?" He goes, "You talk about velocity. That's what you're made of." And he goes, "Why don't you check out the concept of velocity mindset?" And when it hit me, it was something I can get into for two reasons. One, I'm always about how do we do this faster? How do we figure out how to do this? And then secondly, given where I am, having been through those 9 surgeries, having lost a lot of money, and then having now to recapture that money in a limited time period because you'd like to retire and so forth, I'm living velocity, if you will. So it's a true brand where it's authentic, but it's also something that I've been doing all my life.
And it's near and dear to your heart. And
exactly.
I love that. I love that there's a story behind it. Unfortunately, it came from a place of hardship, but I apologize that I didn't know about what you had gone through post presidencies. That's a rough 9 surgeries is a rough go for anybody, Ron. And, it really gives people pause about who we are as entrepreneurs and what happens if we, the product, are flat on our backs.
Right.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why it's always good to leverage, and diversify. So it's not just you. You got some products you can sell online. I had the consulting that I was doing that allowed me to make some kind of money.
Yeah.
But what I also had was a disability policy. And so for your clients that are looking to get in the speaking business, that must is a disability policy. That's the one thing that kept me going.
If anything catastrophic ever happened, 1 in 3, I think, women get breast cancer or something like that. So, there's something in place should that happen. And, I think just having that plan in your mind of what you would do if something like that happened. I've got the emergency file up in the safe. If something ever happened to me, here's where you donate all my books and like, I don't know. I just think these things through, but, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you bounced back with velocity, Ron. This is really, really good. And let's talk a little bit about how the velocity mindset can apply to a speaker who wants to get booked maybe faster or more often or whatever it might be.
Okay. So we can go a number of ways with this. So I'll just talk from my experiences and also what I know about the industry, right?
Okay.
So what I teach audiences is number one, don't sell the how, sell the outcome.
Yeah.
So the how is
isn't important.
Yeah, it's how you do it. So you're not selling yourself as a speaker because that's the how. A consultant is the how. A coach is the how. The outcome is what someone's trying to achieve as a result of your services. That's what they pay a lot of money for, and that's really all that they're interested in. So when you position yourself with a velocity mindset, the reason why it's attracted by the audience is because they hear the word velocity and everybody wants to speed up what they're doing, okay? And also in sales, what usually happens in sales? You have a great year. What do? They got to cut your territory a little bit or they raise your quota. And yet you're still the same person. And what I teach for audiences, in a manufacturing concern, if someone buys a $2 million piece of equipment and they're only making 10 units a week, it's costing them X. But if they increase that productivity to 100, all right, it's costing them a lot less because the cost amortized. So we look at ourselves as a machine.
Right.
Everything we have to do from creating the material, delivering it, and selling it, we all face the same problem. How do we do it faster? How can we get the speeches booked faster or the engagements booked so we have the time to prepare for them, do them well, and move on? When I first started this business in 1989, Gil Eagles, who is a Hall of Fame speaker, is a good friend of mine, he took me to lunch and he told me 2 important things. He goes, number one, remember this. There are a lot of great speakers that are broke because they can't get a gig. And there are a lot of not so great speakers who are making a ton of money because they can get a gig.
Right.
So number one is, yes, you have to be a great speaker, but you also have to learn how to sell yourself. Then the second thing he taught me was, everybody looks at the speaking engagement as the end all be all. You got it, that's the end. He always said to me, look at it as the leverage to what's the next step.
Mm-hmm.
So for me and my business, and I want to be very careful here because I always say this when I did the chapters and say, look, the beauty about our business is there's many models that work. So what I'm going to share is just what I've done.
Right. This
Doesn't
is
mean
what
what
works for
somebody
you.
else has to do.
Sure.
I just want them to listen from their lens and saying, what can they take from it to apply to their model?
Yep, for sure.
So leverage was always something that I lived with. It was in my sales career. It's how do you turn one thing into a bigger piece? That's velocity, because it takes you so much time to sell a new client. Whereas if you can increase business with the existing client, it takes less time and it's usually more profitable.
Okay, so is that one of our tips that we want to make sure people drill down on is how can you leverage each existing client and see what more work there might be to do with them? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. So I know that for me, I can engage an audience on a stage, get a standing ovation, but that's not enough for me.
Right.
I need that, and I want a big piece of that, but I also need to see results because of how I'm made up.
Right.
The results guy. So I can roll my sleeves up and go in and consult with a company, get them from point A to point B, and that becomes my success stories on the stage. So the question is, what do you have in your bag of tricks that you can market?
Right.
Now, it could be anything from assessments which we do. It could be books, CDs. It could be online programs. And Neil Cobain always had a great saying he would share with me and some of the people he would speak to. He'd say, consider your speaking business as an amusement park. And an amusement park, you have different rides, right? What's the one ride that if they go on first and they're going to have the best experience, they want to go on the rest of your rides?
Right.
To me, the one ride was speaking. Because the moment I get them thinking, then it allows me to go and have a deeper conversation with them about how you're going to execute and what else can you do. And that usually leads to the other business. So point number one, don't look at the speaking engagement as being the end all be all. Look at it as a stepping stone to something bigger and make sure that you're working it that way. And
are you planting seeds? Like, for instance, are you sending out a copy of your book, Lead, Sell, or Get Out of the Way, with each contract that goes out so that, okay, we're planting seeds for volume discounts and let's get a book in everybody's hands? Like, what are you doing? And
yeah, so I don't like selling from the back of the room. I don't like it because I when I'm up on stage, I'm focusing on the audience, and I then usually forget the pitch anyway. Because I'm there.
It's not everybody's cup of tea, Ron. That's for sure.
No, I sell it up front.
Yeah.
And the way
so your goal is to put a book in everybody's hand. Do you have that question? Well, how long would you like this message to last, or is that too corny for a cool cat like yourself?
The question I ask. Here's what I did. The question I ask, and it's a question that your people can use.
Yeah.
What is your biggest fear once the meeting is over?
Ooh, that's a good one. I love that. That's gold. Let's put that in the show notes, please, Monica. What is your biggest fear once the meeting is over? That people will forget what you've said is probably
exactly how they're going to do it.
Nothing will happen.
And then I say, okay, so number one, there's ways that we can help you with that because you're absolutely right. We just do a one-time speech and it doesn't get followed up, you'll have limited return on your investment.
Right.
So I will give 3 options for every deal. The first option would be the main option, everything. So it would be, let's say, there was 200 people in the audience, it would be 200 sets of my books and the men cards would go with it, it'd be my speech. And it might be a quarterly assessment with the management team to see what else that they could be doing.
Okay.
Option number 2 could be the books and the speech about the quarterly assessment. And option number 3 is just a speech.
Okay.
Now, this does a couple of things for you psychologically.
Right.
Number 1, it takes the decision away from somebody as to whether or not they use you as to how they use you. Mm-hmm. When they get to that second part, it's a different conversation.
Right.
All right. Secondly, you're giving them the choice, the power.
And
And so
people
what?
like to choose. They like to have a choice.
Absolutely. And then what do they usually want? They want option one. They want the whole thing.
Yeah, give me
You
the
know,
best. It's got to be
yeah,
the best. Yeah.
exactly. But then someone will say, "Well, I can't afford that." Oh, can you discount that? I'll say, "No, but if you want to take some money off, I'll go to option two, and you still get a book to give everybody, still get the long-term return on investment, and your managers can use the book for some of their training in the future." What
Have you
really
ever heard?
happens,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
what happens in this model is 60% of the people will take option B,
Hmm.
the middle option, which is just about, it's right in the strike zone.
Right, right,
Option C, which is just a speech, is usually below what people want. They want the speech, but they want to move people to a new behavior.
right. And you're going to
And
get
then,
to that through that question, which is a
right.
fabulous question.
So only maybe 10, 15% will take option C. Most will take option B, and a few may take option A. But
Right,
if they
right.
do take option C, the beauty about this, Jane, they're not going to ask you for a lower price in your keynote because they just went to the lowest option.
Right, right, right.
But you're
That's a
still
beautiful.
getting a keynote
You
at
have
book three.
already done away with the negotiation, and I
Right,
love it. Have you ever heard this term? There are people who want everything for free. They're called freeple. And there's
right,
people who want everything for cheap, and they're called cheaple. There's one more in between, but then there's also preple, and they will pay a premium for everything.
right,
I love that idea, and your goal is to attract people so that they are conditioned to want to have the best of everything and take the big package, which is a
right.
beautiful
Now,
thing.
we have a challenge in doing that. The
Yeah.
challenge is, who are we calling on?
Mm-hmm.
If we're just dealing, if we, the word meeting planner is a very broad sense, okay? You can have legitimate meeting planners that are staff functions, and their jobs are basically to go to identify speakers and then bring the best of the best to the executives who are sponsoring the meeting to help make a decision, or to bring to a committee to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to go after the CEOs and VPs. We want to get to those decision makers ourselves because we can sell it better than any of the meeting planner, because the meeting planner is not really caring about, what happens is, if you look at budgets, okay, speaker is a line item on a budget. Meeting planner doesn't have a lot of power to go beyond that.
Right, right.
The VP has access to different budgets. Like when I was doing Hertz equipment rental, and the VP wanted to hire me to do 3 keynotes, and he did want the books and the other stuff. But he goes, "How am I going to do that? The budget for speakers only X." But he goes, "Wait a minute.
I can
We
grab it.
use our entire training budget. I can take some money from there to get the other stuff to get your higher fee. And wait a minute, I can still go down the hall to speak to the VP of marketing and say, hey, instead of giving 3 towels out, let's give 2, and let's give Ron's book out and place for the 3rd towel." So
Beautiful.
if you can speak to the people who have access to the budgets, it doesn't become an issue. But if you're speaking to lower level staff members who don't have that access,
Yes.
you either have to train them to have the right conversation with the other people, or try and have them see why it would be a good idea to have you talk directly to those. Sometimes it doesn't always work, and you have to go through the meeting planner.
Yeah, I just had this happen with a client who, he thought it was a slam dunk, but he wasn't really with the decision maker. And he hadn't, of course, trained this person on how to sell it to the decision maker. And that ended up not happening. Now, you're going direct to corporate. Do you also go direct to corporation or to associations that are in your kind of target market?
Yeah, we do associations. So the other thing about velocity also is figuring out who you really want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was elected vice president of NSA, it starts the 4-year journey. Vice president, president-elect, president, immediate past president.
Mm-hmm.
We know from past presidents that, you lose your speaking calendar because you got to speak for NSA, you got to speak around the world, you got to do all these meetings. And
Right.
it's really hard. Your speaking business is going to take a dive. And so
Right.
I just had a divorce at that time. And I knew that if I was going to succeed, I needed revenue no matter what. So it was right at the same time that I was toying around with the concept of a paid mastermind. I know that some people did it. It was another revenue source. And I said, what if I can create my own mastermind to get CEOs in? But what size would work for me? And what I realized is I got invited to speak to YPO, Young Presidents Organization.
Mm-hmm.
And my first members for the CRO came from that. And what I found out is YPO members already invest in their careers, the presidents. They want to grow. They'll spend money on that.
They're used to it. Yeah, for sure.
And they'll also, what they represent usually companies in $10 million to $200 million in size. So I knew for the CRO, that was my market. Mixing them with corporate Fortune 500 was not going to work, number one. They're going to have different conversations. But these guys and ladies would make the decisions faster. So I knew for the CRO market, that's the demographic I needed to go after. And so what happened was I got the CRO off the ground right at the time I started my presidential journey. Mm-hmm. It gave me sustained revenue. What I didn't expect was they all turned around giving me 6-figure contracts for their companies because they started buying into me as a coach, and then they started selling each other on me. So it led to a large volume of revenue in another area I didn't expect. But that's the leverage part we're talking about, right?
Love it.
So if we break it down to simple steps, who's the key market? Who needs you more than anybody else? So it's going to take an easier time to sell it, number one.
Right.
And number two, what are the different stages you can leverage one piece of business to the next?
So not just the one-off of doing one presentation, but really thinking about what comes after that and having a host of things that you can offer them.
Yeah, think about it. If you want to, let's say, do 60 speeches in a year, do you know how hard it is to sell 60 different companies?
Yeah, and maybe you do 20 that was a rainmaker for all the other things that you have.
Yeah, and then they led you to other divisions or other people and the other thing is create your own opportunities. I remember I was invited to do a keynote for ACFA Medical Imaging. Mm-hmm. Now, ACFA Medical Imaging, I did ACFA Imaging, which was the film people, but then the medical imaging was the X-ray part, and they just bought out Sterling. The Sterling executives took over the company, but it was still the ACFA name. So you had two disparate cultures that came together, and they're having their first kickoff meeting in Vegas. Mm-hmm. So it took me 10 calls to get to this guy because I was referred to him by the other division. He finally calls me back and he goes, yeah, we got a meeting coming up, the first meeting for this whole team in Vegas, 500 people. Are you available? And I said, what's the date? And they go, yeah. And he goes, all right, send me your tape. Which at that time we used tapes. And call me back. And if you don't get me, be as tenacious as you were up to now. So I called him another 8 times and he gets on the phone. And he goes, okay, so how much is a speech? So I said, well, tell me first what you're trying to accomplish. What are your 3 biggest issues? Okay. And these are the questions we have in the book, Lead So Get Out of the Way. Okay. And he goes, well, we have this disparate culture. This meeting is really important. The VP now handles $2 billion of business. We got to get them together on the same culture. And what are you looking for me to do in this meeting? He goes, well, I need you to help us unite them. I said, so you're looking for some team building? He goes, yes. And he goes, in second thought, we're also doing a university where we're doing breakouts. So after we did this, I said, let me come down and visit with you because this is really an important issue. He goes, all right. And I was in North Carolina anyway, so I went down and meet with them. We expanded this conversation, and the deal eventually landed as a 1 week with them in Vegas. It was 1 keynote and 7 2-hour breakout sessions and 500 sets of books and tapes.
Ooh. And
because I wasn't selling a speech, I was selling a solution for them to make this merger successful. Okay?
Beautiful.
Now, we go down to do it in Vegas, and I remember there was an NSA meeting, a winter meeting right before that. I was going to a winter meeting in California, then to Vegas. And I can't tell you, 90% of my colleagues said, you're crazy for doing it. I go, why? You know your voice is going to give out. What are you talking about? And then I started doubting myself, and I went to a friend and goes, what are you kidding me? Where are these people going after today? And where are you going? Get your head straight. So I went to Vegas and did it. And I went to every general session because it allowed me to do some perfect intelligence gathering to find out what their issues are.
Right.
So after the meeting was over and I left, and I got good reviews, most speakers would say, I did a great job. Next. I called the client back up and said, would you like my recommendations and my findings and recommendations? He goes, what are you talking about? And I spent a week with you guys. I heard the issues of the top executives. I heard, what's going on. I got some ideas for you. So they arranged for me to come down in April of that year to do a 2-hour meeting to share my capabilities with the VP and his 4 direct reports. And James, this was the most valuable lesson I ever learned. I opened my PowerPoint. I'm talking strategic account selling. VP says, stop. And he turns to his direct reports. If he talks about strategic account selling, what are they going to do? They put their hands down, thumbs down. Like value add selling, same thing, stop. Okay, selling value in a market where you need to get market share, stop. So at that point, I said, okay, I'm confused. You want to do this, you want to increase your sales force, but yet you're turning me down everything. I'm closing my PowerPoint, and I'm putting this meeting in your hands. What am I missing? And this is when the VP taught me something. He goes, you know, Ron, I'm like every other VP who's hired you to be a speaker. You come in, you do your thing, and do we ever follow up on your message? And the answer is no. Mm-mm. And he said, but you know what? Right now I got two disparate cultures. I need to bring one sales process in to unite the entire company. There's a book out there called The Titan Principle. It was my first book. It's a pretty damn good book, he says. And I realized at that point, that was the magic. He wasn't bringing me in to speak. He was bringing me in as a resource to provide a unifying process to bring the people together. And what I learned in that meeting is that they really understand the motives of what people are really trying to achieve beyond hiring a speaker. You're going to have so many opportunities opening up to you as you wouldn't believe. Mm. What came from that was, he says, okay, the first step we got to do is we got to put you in Chicago, bring our entire management team in. And I figured since he's ready to tell me what to do, why am I going to start talking? How do you suggest we do a 2-day meeting? He goes, okay, number one, don't be the speaker the whole time. What do you mean? Get them involved. Let them tell you what they need. Now, I learned something because up to that point, I always felt like I had to do speaking every minute in a day or 2 days. And I'd walk out and I couldn't move. In this meeting, 2 days, we figured out what the 4 key areas were, did a half-hour module on it, broke them up into groups for an hour. Go talk about it. The next hour, they processed their findings. They learned from each other. The next 3 modules, meeting's over. My ratings, the speaker, best speaker we ever heard. Because they were engaged.
Right.
And it led to national tours and an event. It led to $600,000 of business. But I wasn't looking at the speech. And most importantly, I found the real motivation of what this guy was trying to really achieve, which was to bring unity to a disparate organization. So for your people on the phone, they're not buying a speech. They're buying some kind of an outcome. Find out what that outcome is that they're striving for. It will allow you to get into better conversations. And then the key is psychologically, when you present then what you can do for them, you're presenting it in context to what's important to them. And that's when it's heard with more value. If you present it before you create the context, it lands on deaf ears.
There was a lot of good stuff that we could be unpacking in that, Ron. Don't have what you're going to sell in your mind before you even walk into a room. I've heard you say it on tape before, make it a collaborative effort, right? Because they didn't want any of the things that you could have pulled out of your tickle trunk there anyway. They were really interested in something different. And so you collaborated and got there, and then he just laid it all out for you. It was a beautiful thing.
Right.
And also, you're not having to do all the heavy lifting when you're actually out there training. There are a lot of smart people in the room. Count on them to come up with some great ideas.
Yeah, leverage the audience because they're going to help you if they're a part of it. You know, we're not the gods. You know, we're not the kings who know everything. Yeah. And you got to take that ego and leave it at the door. There's another thing that we've been doing. So I had a failure in life. Believe it or not. I know it's hard to believe, but I had a main failure. There was one company, a global organization that brought me into all its divisions. And in one division, that's the one company we helped with that retraining the industry where they sold $200 million. All the other industries wanted, the divisions, they wanted that magic. One division said, you know what, we're not going to bring you in the national sales meeting like everybody else is. We want to bring you in to a private meeting we're having in December. I said, okay. And they were doing a price increase. And they wanted me to come in and give the skill sets of how they can sell a price increase. Because I didn't do my due diligence properly at that time in my career, I walk into this meeting, and these are all seasoned sales veterans, and they're ticked off. Why? The division is the only division that's making money, and they're being feel that there's pressure to sell price increases when no one else is getting the pressure, and they're looking at me as being the messenger to push them when they don't want to be pushed. Especially when they're not being appreciated. So I do role plays sometimes when I do some of that stuff. It was a horrible experience. I started criticizing them, telling them what they should be doing. At the end of the 2 days, let's just put it this way. They gave me the reviews, and I'm from New York. There were curse words in that review that I didn't even know what they meant.
Well, that's harsh.
So it was harsh. So I called up the VP of Hertz because we became good friends. And I shared it with him. I was vulnerable. And he said, okay, give yourself a day, come back and ask yourself, what could you do differently? What did you learn? But the interesting thing I learned from that is that role plays are very powerful. But if you don't create a safe space for the audience, it can backfire on you. So I realized it's not about me being a hero, it's about them being the hero.
Right.
So now when I do keynotes, I bring 2 people up on stage, okay? They do the role play. But all I'm saying is, look, it's not about right or wrong. We're going to do it one way. Then I'll take the person playing the salesperson to the side, ask him to just ask one different question. He goes and does it. And I'll ask the audience, what's different? Did you see anything different? And they see before themselves how the conversation is drastically transformed, and the 2 people on stage are the heroes. That's what came out of that defeat. So we're all going to have defeats. Don't let it stop you. What can you take out of those defeats to build your business further?
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, Ron, let's talk about where people can go to get the book, Lead, Sell, or Get Out of the Way.
Yes, Lead, Sell, Get Out of the Way is my last book. It's still selling quite well, and it has all the conversations that would talk about the questions to ask and how to position yourself. Amazon's the best place to get it. They have the best discounts, and they have it in stock, so I would suggest that.
Great. Now, is there anything else that we should cover before we wrap up around the velocity mindset?
Yeah, so one of the things I'm really getting into also when it comes to velocity and all that is we're doing a lot of neuroscience, especially in that role play. And I'm really studying the brain and how it operates. So to make this simple, your listeners have to understand anybody who calls anybody up on a sales call is an interruption. I'm interrupting a day.
Right.
Even if I'm calling you, Jane, you happen to be my client, I'm still interrupting your day.
Right.
So the moment someone calls and interrupts your train of thought, what happens to you?
You get a little pissed.
Yeah, your cortisol goes up. The fight or flight hormone, right? The stress goes up, right?
Yeah.
And if we take cortisol on a scale, 2 scales, 0 to 5, which is the engagement area, 6 to 10 is the stress area. We're not getting rid of cortisol, we have to manage it. So if we know that we're interrupting somebody, especially if they never heard of us, we know the cortisol goes up. It's going to 6, 7, 8. How do we manage the environment so they want to talk to us?
Yes, how?
Well, it's not about selling a speaker, because that's going to increase the cortisol, especially if they don't think they have a need.
Right.
It's not about you, so don't start talking about yourself because they have no idea who you are.
Right.
It's about asking them where they're trying to go.
Yeah.
It's about finding out, I ask people, well, how many people are going to be in the audience? About this and that. Are you kidding me? That's not going to want to talk to you. Say, look, I know you're getting approached by many speakers. I just have one question. In the meeting that you're holding this year, what are the 3 things that you want to see different next year going forward?
Right.
And they start telling you that.
Should you get their buy-in, Ron, before you get to that question that they are going to take a moment to talk to you?
We got to get buy-in. So a sale, when I close a speech, is nothing more than a sum total of many sales along the way. So the first thing we have to do is get buy-in for them to want to talk to us, give us more time, right? They're not going to give us more time if we talk about ourselves. They're not going to give us more time when we talk about things that that are not important to them. They're going to give us more time if we allow them to talk about what they're striving to do, what the challenges are, and have them expand on it. And then we can help them achieve those things. That's when they're going to give you the time.
Very good. Very good. Well, the book is called Lead, Sell, or Get Out of the Way by Mr. Ron Karr. That's Karr. And I want to say thank you so much, Ron, for being on the show with us today and sharing your 30 years of wisdom.
My pleasure, Jane. Thank you for having me.
Wealthy Speaker listeners, if you have enjoyed our show today, I hope you'll leave us some love out there on iTunes. Let us know that you're listening, and certainly let Ron know. You can pick up Lead, Sell, or Get Out of the Way on Amazon. And with that, we will say, see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now, everyone. Hey, thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed our show, you'll want to come and visit us at the Wealthy Speaker School, where we provide a proven roadmap for building your dream business. Go to wealthyspeakerschool.com. And for show notes for today's podcast, head on over to speakerlauncher.com and click on podcast. I'll see you soon, Wealthy Speakers.